There are moments when the sky seems to whisper, and then there are moments when it feels as though it is preparing to tear away every illusion you have been relying on. Today belongs to the second kind. If you have found yourself carrying an uneasy feeling that refuses to disappear, if your thoughts have been circling without a clear reason, or if an invisible pressure has been growing beneath the surface of your daily life, do not dismiss it as coincidence. Something remarkably precise is unfolding. On August the 2nd, the Sun in Leo forms an exact 135-degree angle with Black Moon Lilith in Sagittarius. That description may sound like nothing more than technical astrology, yet its emotional reality reaches much deeper than any chart can immediately reveal. This alignment places two radically different forces within you into direct conflict. One is the identity you have carefully cultivated over time, the version of yourself that knows how to earn approval, command attention, and shape the image the outside world recognizes. The other is the untamed part of your nature that has never fully accepted those expectations, the voice that refuses to shrink itself, the instinct that cannot be domesticated, the truth you may have hidden so thoroughly that even you hesitate to acknowledge it. Today, those two forces are no longer willing to exist separately. They are moving toward each other with undeniable intensity, demanding an encounter that cannot be postponed. What makes this even more significant is that this moment is not appearing on its own. It is positioned directly between three major planetary shifts, all taking place within a 48-hour period. The sky has layered these influences together in a way that creates extraordinary momentum, producing an atmosphere that feels unusually concentrated. It has been a long time since the energy has gathered with this level of precision, and because of that, whatever rises into your awareness today carries the possibility of changing your relationship with yourself in a lasting way. If the past several days have left you feeling restless without understanding why, if it has seemed as though something beneath the surface has been trying to get your attention without revealing its name, stay with this journey, because there is a very specific explanation for that sensation. Before we reach it, we need to retrace the sequence of events that has been unfolding above us. None of what occurs today can be fully understood unless you first recognize the chain of experiences that quietly prepared the ground throughout this week. Once those separate pieces come together, what has felt confusing may suddenly become impossible to ignore. This story truly began several days ago, long before August 2nd arrived. The atmosphere did not suddenly change overnight. It has been gradually building, and if you sensed that progression before you could explain it, there is a reason for that. On July 22nd, the Sun crossed into Leo, the sign it naturally calls home, the place where the solar sense of self expresses its greatest strength. For many people, this transition awakened a renewed desire to create, to shine, to be recognized without apology, and to step forward instead of remaining hidden. You may have noticed your own spirit responding with fresh motivation, as though a dormant fire inside you suddenly remembered it was meant to burn brightly. That renewed confidence felt genuine, but it was only the opening chapter. 5 days later, on July 27th, the Sun reached an exact opposition with Pluto in Aquarius, and the emotional landscape changed dramatically. The bright confidence that Leo encourages was pulled into Pluto's territory, where appearances matter far less than uncomfortable truth. Suddenly, questions of power, control, vulnerability, and hidden motives demanded attention. Situations that had seemed manageable became emotionally intense. Relationships exposed deeper patterns. Circumstances forced confrontations that many people would have preferred to avoid. If it seemed as though life stripped away something you believed was secure, or if an unexpected realization shattered the story you had been telling yourself about another person, or even about your own identity, that was the unmistakable signature of Pluto revealing what had been buried beneath the surface. Then the emotional current shifted once again. Only 2 days afterward, on July 29th, the Sun joined Jupiter in Leo. The atmosphere expanded almost immediately. Hope returned. Confidence rose. Possibilities suddenly looked larger than they had only days before. It was easy to feel as though surviving Pluto's difficult lessons had earned you a new beginning, almost as though the universe had rewarded your perseverance with renewed optimism. Yet that uplifting wave carried a hidden complication. Jupiter has a remarkable ability to magnify whatever it touches, and when it embraces the solar identity, confidence can quietly become exaggeration without anyone realizing it. By the time August 2nd arrives, the ego may genuinely believe it has already conquered every shadow, overcome every obstacle, and secured its rightful place in the light. That is precisely the moment when Black Moon Lilith enters the conversation. Her presence interrupts that comfortable certainty. She does not congratulate the version of you that has learned to succeed. Instead, she points toward everything that has been left outside the story. She reminds you that one essential piece has been ignored, and unfortunately, it is the very piece you have spent the most energy trying to avoid. To understand why her appearance carries such emotional force, it helps to understand what Black Moon Lilith truly represents. She is not a physical planet traveling through space. She is not an asteroid moving alongside the others. She is a mathematical point, the place where the moon reaches its greatest distance from the Earth during its orbit. In literal astronomical terms, she represents emptiness, a point defined by absence rather than material form. Symbolically, that image could not be more fitting. Lilith represents what has been pushed beyond acceptance, what has been separated from belonging, what remains present even after it has been denied. The ancient mythology reflects this symbolism with striking clarity. According to the story, Lilith was created as Adam's first companion, formed from the very same earth and therefore existing as an equal rather than a subordinate. When she was expected to surrender her own nature and accept obedience instead of equality, she refused. Rather than abandon herself, she chose exile. Rather than remain inside the safety of the garden at the cost of her authenticity, she embraced the unknown wilderness. That decision transformed her reputation. She was condemned, removed from the accepted narrative, and gradually reshaped into a monstrous figure through generations of folklore. Yet beneath that distortion lies the deeper symbolic truth. Lilith has always represented the part that refuses to betray itself simply to remain accepted. That same symbolism lives within every birth chart and becomes especially powerful during transits like the one unfolding now, because whenever Lilith is activated, the hidden self begins asking whether the identity you proudly present to the world has been built by expressing your truth or by abandoning the very part of yourself that has been waiting all along to finally be seen. And that question becomes the essential doorway into everything that happens next. What makes this moment impossible to overlook is that it is not asking you to discover something new about yourself. It is asking you to stop pretending that something old was ever truly gone. Black Moon Lilith has always symbolized the part of your spirit that learned, often very early in life, that certain qualities would not be welcomed. Perhaps you were told you cared too deeply, spoke too honestly, desired too much freedom, questioned too many rules, or carried an intensity that made other people uncomfortable. Little by little, those qualities were tucked away, not because they disappeared, but because you believed hiding them was the price of belonging. Lilith represents every instinct you buried beneath acceptable behavior, every truth you softened before speaking, every longing you convinced yourself to ignore because revealing it felt too risky. She is the voice beneath your polished identity, the place where desire exists before it has been filtered by fear. At this point in time, she is traveling through Sagittarius. She entered this sign in December 2025, and she will remain there until September. That placement gives her message a very particular focus. Sagittarius governs belief, personal freedom, exploration, and the search for meaning. So the hidden wound Lilith exposes here revolves around those very themes. She asks whether your convictions genuinely belong to you or whether they became another carefully constructed shelter. She questions whether your pursuit of wisdom has brought you closer to yourself or simply farther away from the emotions you have been avoiding. She shines a light on the possibility that constant movement, endless learning, spiritual practices, or philosophical certainty may sometimes become subtle ways of escaping stillness, because remaining busy can feel safer than sitting quietly with unresolved pain. Within Sagittarius, Lilith protects a truth that many people resist confronting. What appears to be fierce independence may actually conceal a profound fear of emotional closeness. What feels like an endless search for truth may sometimes be an attempt to outrun vulnerability before it catches up. Those uncomfortable possibilities are exactly what stand opposite the confident solar identity today, creating an encounter that reaches beneath appearances and into the motivations that have quietly shaped your choices for much longer than you realized. If something inside you immediately recognizes those words, even if only as a faint feeling, pay attention to that response, because it may be revealing far more than your conscious mind is ready to admit. The extraordinary nature of today's experience also comes from the geometry connecting these two forces. This is not a conjunction where everything merges into one unmistakable experience. It is not an opposition that places two obvious sides in direct confrontation. It is not even a square, the kind of aspect that announces conflict so loudly that it cannot be ignored. Instead, the Sun and black Moon Lilith meet through a sesquiquadrate, an exact 135-degree angle. At first glance, that detail may seem insignificant, but emotionally it changes everything. Some aspects arrive like storms that immediately demand action. This one behaves differently. Imagine carrying a tiny splinter beneath your skin. It is not dramatic enough to stop your day, yet it never completely disappears. Every movement reminds you that something is there, even if you cannot immediately locate it. That is the emotional signature of a sesquiquadrate. It produces an underlying irritation, a subtle tension, a persistent feeling that something is out of alignment without clearly revealing where the imbalance begins. The discomfort remains just beneath awareness, quietly influencing thoughts, emotions, and reactions until it finally finds an outlet. That is precisely why this transit becomes so psychologically revealing. The hidden truth rarely arrives through a spectacular realization or a sudden flash of enlightenment. Instead, it escapes almost accidentally. It appears in the sentence that leaves your mouth before you have time to reconsider. It emerges through an emotional response that surprises even you. It reveals itself in an impulsive desire to tear down part of your life. Not because destruction is truly what you want, but because some forgotten part of your spirit desperately wants proof that it has not completely surrendered its freedom. Under this influence, you may finally speak words you have rehearsed silently for months without ever intending to say them aloud. Only after they have been spoken do you realize how long they have been waiting beneath the surface. The carefully maintained image does not collapse because another person exposes it. It slips because maintaining it has quietly become exhausting. If the past several days have filled you with unexplained tension, emotional agitation, or the persistent feeling that something inside you has been trying to rise into consciousness, this is why. What has been gathering beneath the surface throughout the week finally reaches the point where remaining hidden is no longer possible. The deeper truth has stopped asking for permission. It is beginning to reveal itself. When this energy enters everyday life, it rarely announces itself through dramatic external events alone. More often, it changes the way you suddenly see your own behavior. The Sun in Leo naturally longs to express warmth, creativity, generosity, confidence, and a healthy desire to be appreciated. Those qualities are not flaws. They are among the most beautiful expressions of Leo energy. Yet every strength carries a shadow when it becomes disconnected from authenticity. The shadow appears when the desire to be loved quietly transforms into the need to perform. It appears when approval becomes more important than honesty. It appears when the version of yourself presented to the world is carefully edited so that only the admirable pieces remain visible, while every uncomfortable emotion stays hidden behind the curtain. Black Moon Lilith in Sagittarius has no interest in maintaining that carefully arranged presentation. She looks directly beyond reputation, beyond appearance, beyond the identity you have learned to display with confidence. Her concern is much simpler and much more uncomfortable. She wants to know what you actually believe once every expectation has been removed. She wants to know what your heart genuinely longs for beneath the stories you tell yourself. She wants to reveal the needs you have repeatedly denied because acknowledging them would force you to change your life. That is where today's friction becomes deeply personal. You may suddenly recognize the places where you have continued saying yes despite wanting to say no. You may become painfully aware of the roles you have accepted within relationships, careers, or even spiritual practices that no longer reflect the person you truly are beneath the performance. These realizations can arrive unexpectedly, but they are not random interruptions. They are invitations to see yourself without the protective layers that once felt necessary. One of the most powerful places this energy often expresses itself is within relationships, because Lilith consistently exposes questions of power, freedom, and personal autonomy. You could find yourself feeling an unexpected wave of irritation towards someone you genuinely care about without immediately understanding its source. You could also experience an intense attraction towards someone who seems completely incompatible with the carefully ordered life you have created, someone whose presence feels disruptive, unpredictable, or even dangerous to the identity you have worked so hard to maintain. Those emotional reactions may appear irrational on the surface, but they deserve careful attention. They are not necessarily instructions to act. They are reflections showing you something hidden within yourself. They function like mirrors, revealing the parts of your inner world that have been waiting for acknowledgement long before today's extraordinary alignment finally brought them into view. Pay close attention to the people who stir the strongest emotions inside you today, because under this transit they are rarely appearing in your life by accident. The person who unsettles you the most, whether through admiration, frustration, attraction, or even criticism, is often reflecting a part of yourself that has been pushed into the shadows for far too long. Perhaps it is their fearless honesty that unsettles you. Perhaps it is their unwillingness to compromise, their independence, their unpredictability, or the unapologetic way they move through the world. Whatever quality captures your attention most intensely is likely pointing towards something you once possessed, or something you secretly longed to express, but learned to suppress. The greater the emotional charge, the deeper that forgotten piece of your own identity has been buried. That is why your reactions today deserve your curiosity rather than your judgment. They are revealing what has been waiting beneath the surface. Earlier, I mentioned that strange feeling of restlessness, the sensation that something invisible has been pressing against your awareness without fully revealing itself. This is where that mystery begins to make sense. On the very same day that the Sun forms its exact sesquiquadrate with Black Moon Lilith, August 2nd, Mars leaves Taurus and enters Gemini. That shift dramatically changes the way this entire experience unfolds. Mars in Gemini does not keep emotions locked inside for very long. It moves quickly, thinks quickly, speaks quickly, and reacts before hesitation has an opportunity to intervene. The hidden truth uncovered by the Sun and Lilith no longer remains an internal realization. Mars immediately wants expression. It pushes thoughts into conversations, emotions into words, and realizations into actions almost before the conscious mind has finished processing them. This combination creates a powerful sequence. The sesquiquadrate uncovers what has been concealed, then Mars in Gemini gives that hidden truth a voice. That is the atmosphere surrounding today, and understanding it can make an enormous difference. What begins as an inner awakening has a strong likelihood of becoming something spoken aloud. It may appear in a conversation you never intended to have. It may arrive through a message you suddenly feel compelled to send. It may emerge in a confession, a difficult discussion, or an unexpected moment when the truth simply refuses to remain silent any longer. This does not automatically make the experience negative. There are moments when honesty must move faster than fear, because if you pause too long, doubt finds a way to silence it again. At the same time, Mars in Gemini brings its own challenge. Its energy moves in many directions at once. It can scatter attention, creating several conversations without allowing any of them to reach meaningful resolution. It can deliver an important truth wrapped in nervousness, distraction, or emotional urgency, making the deeper message difficult for others to hear. If you feel that overwhelming impulse to finally speak today, allow yourself to honor it, but give your words direction. Rather than releasing your emotions indiscriminately, choose where they truly belong. Speak to the individual who genuinely needs to hear them. If the conversation that matters most is the one you have been avoiding with yourself, then begin there. The important thing is not to force the truth back into hiding, simply because it arrives with unexpected intensity. Before today's alignment even reached its exact point, another important shift quietly prepared the emotional landscape. On August the 1st, Venus completed her journey through Leo and entered Virgo. That transition may already be influencing the way you see your relationships, your priorities, and even yourself. Venus in Leo naturally expresses affection with warmth, generosity, confidence, and open-hearted enthusiasm. Yet once Venus steps into Virgo, the emotional atmosphere changes noticeably. Sentiment gives way to observation. Idealization begins to fade. Instead of simply celebrating love, attention turns toward whether love is functioning in a balanced and sustainable way. Small inconsistencies suddenly become impossible to ignore. Unequal effort becomes visible. Questions arise about whether the emotional investment you continue making is truly being returned. If, before today's major transit even arrived, you found yourself quietly realizing that a relationship, a friendship, or even one of your own repeating patterns no longer feels healthy or authentic, that awareness is closely connected to Venus entering Virgo. She carefully examines what has previously been accepted without question. What she uncovers becomes the emotional material that Black Moon Lilith exposes even more completely today. Together, these influences create an extraordinarily revealing progression. Venus quietly identifies where something has fallen out of balance. Lilith uncovers the hidden desire you have sacrificed in order to preserve that imbalance. Mars in Gemini then supplies the courage, or perhaps the urgency, to finally put those discoveries into words. All of these developments unfold within a 48-hour period, making the emotional atmosphere unusually concentrated. If your inner world has already been shifting during these past several days, then you are not imagining it. You are experiencing exactly the rhythm these transits suggest. Yet the story does not conclude here. Only one day after the Sun and Lilith reach their exact aspect, another significant chapter begins. On August the 3rd, Chiron stations retrograde at 0 degrees of Taurus, introducing an entirely different layer of meaning to everything that has already unfolded. Chiron is often described as the wounded healer. And in Taurus, the deepest wound centers around personal value, physical existence, financial security, stability, and the often hidden belief that safety abundance and lasting support must somehow be earned because they are not naturally deserved. Looking at this sequence as a whole reveals something profoundly important. The Sun and Black Moon, Lilith, expose the carefully maintained identity, the compromises, the performance, and the desires that have remained hidden beneath the surface. Chiron's retrograde station then asks a much deeper question. Why did you begin hiding those parts of yourself in the first place? Again and again, the answer leads back to fear. Fear that complete honesty would cost you the relationship you depend upon. Fear that authenticity would threaten your financial security. Fear that revealing your untamed nature would take away approval, acceptance, stability, or opportunity. The most forbidden truth within this entire transit is not merely the secret you have been carrying. It is the realization that the secret has always been protected by an old wound surrounding your sense of worth. Somewhere along the way, you may have learned to believe that the fully authentic version of yourself was too dangerous to reveal, that acceptance required editing your own nature before offering it to the world. If those words resonate deeply, allow yourself to remain with that realization instead of immediately trying to escape it. Chiron's retrograde journey will continue for the coming months, gradually inviting healing into precisely that place. What emerges today is not the conclusion of your story. It is the beginning of understanding what truly needs attention. The awareness arriving now serves as the diagnosis. The healing unfolds afterward, patiently and deliberately, without demanding immediate perfection. Nothing about this process is designed to punish you. It is preparing you for something much larger. Stepping back to view the wider pattern reveals why these events matter so much. Only 10 days after the exact Sun and Black Moon Lilith alignment, on August the 12th, a solar eclipse takes place in Leo. That approaching eclipse carries enormous significance. Solar eclipses are not ordinary astrological events. They mark profound cosmic resets, moments when one chapter quietly closes, so another can begin with entirely new meaning, and everything unfolding now is preparing the ground for what that powerful eclipse will ultimately reveal. Solar eclipses carry a unique kind of finality. They have a remarkable way of bringing one chapter to a close, while quietly revealing another that could not have appeared until the previous one ended. They do not simply adjust your path, they permanently change its direction. When a solar eclipse arrives, certain identities, beliefs, and patterns have reached the end of their purpose, while entirely new possibilities begin to emerge from places you may never have considered before. That is why I believe everything unfolding on August 2nd is not the destination. It is the preparation. The exact sesquiquadrate between the Sun in Leo and Black Moon Lilith in Sagittarius is exposing the very material the solar eclipse in Leo on August 12th will later reshape. Every hidden truth that rises into your awareness today, every conversation that unexpectedly unfolds, every emotional mask that begins to crack, every realization you can no longer push aside, these are not random experiences that will simply disappear tomorrow. Once they enter your awareness, they cannot be placed back into the shadows, and they are not meant to be. The purpose of today's transit is to reveal what has reached the point where transformation has become possible. It is showing you exactly what has outlived its purpose, so that when the eclipse arrives, you are emotionally prepared to release it instead of fighting to preserve it. If the discoveries of today leave you feeling exposed, uncomfortable, defensive, or tempted to pretend that nothing significant has happened, pause before following that instinct. The discomfort itself is not evidence that something has gone wrong. It is not the universe attempting to embarrass you or punish you for your imperfections. It is something far more compassionate. It is an invitation to finally set down the emotional weight you have carried for much longer than necessary. The cosmos is not asking you to prove your worth. It is quietly reminding you that you no longer need to carry burdens that stopped serving you long ago. When that willingness to release begins, the solar eclipse on August the 12th becomes an opening into a new chapter, instead of an overwhelming force that tears down everything unexpectedly. The experience remains powerful either way, but your relationship with that power changes depending upon whether you have already begun cooperating with the truth being revealed now. Although this transit reaches everyone, it does not express itself identically in every life. The symbolism adapts according to the way your own chart naturally receives it. Those whose charts contain a strong emphasis on fire energy are likely to experience this period as an intensely personal confrontation with identity itself. The distance between the person presented to the world and the person who exists in complete privacy becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. The lesson emerging here is not about becoming someone different. It is about discovering how to express your authentic light without relying upon carefully rehearsed performances or external validation. The recognition you have been pursuing may actually be the very thing preventing you from feeling truly free. For individuals whose charts are grounded more heavily in earth energy, this process often becomes tangible through practical realities involving the body, financial stability, work, or physical security. Situations that once seemed acceptable simply because they provided comfort or predictability may suddenly reveal the emotional cost they have quietly demanded over time. A career, a relationship, a living arrangement, or another form of stability may no longer feel nourishing once you honestly acknowledge how much of your spirit has been sacrificed to maintain it. Through Lilith, the deeper lesson becomes recognizing that your value cannot be measured by possessions, endurance, or the amount of discomfort you have learned to tolerate. Those carrying stronger air energy may experience today's influence most vividly through the mind and through communication. Thoughts that have remained unspoken may suddenly emerge without careful planning. Positions you have attempted to balance for the sake of harmony may become impossible to maintain. The habit of adapting yourself to every perspective simply to avoid conflict begins to lose its effectiveness. Lilith encourages uncompromising honesty rather than endless flexibility, asking you to speak from genuine conviction instead of constantly reshaping yourself to satisfy everyone around you. When water energy is especially prominent, the deepest movement often occurs within the emotional landscape. Questions surrounding boundaries, emotional giving, compassion, and protection naturally rise to the surface. There may be a realization that caring for others has gradually become a substitute for caring for yourself, or that nurturing has slowly crossed the invisible line into control without your conscious awareness. Lilith reminds you that authentic love never requires abandoning your own emotional well-being. Real compassion includes the courage to protect your own energy with the same devotion you so willingly offer everyone else. As all of these influences gather together, the most important question becomes what you choose to do with what is revealed. This is the message I hope remains with you long after today's astrology has passed. For many people, this day will not deliver an obvious breakthrough wrapped in certainty. A sesquiquadrate rarely functions that way. Instead, it creates a persistent discomfort, an emotional splinter that continues demanding your attention until you finally remove it. Alongside that subtle pressure, Venus in Virgo continues examining relationships with remarkable clarity. Mars in Gemini gives hidden truths an immediate voice, and Chiron prepares to expose the deeper wound surrounding personal worth. Together, these planetary movements create an extraordinarily revealing 48-hour period surrounding August 2nd, one of the most psychologically significant stretches of the entire summer. Yet within that intensity lies an extraordinary opportunity. Those who allow the discomfort to become a teacher instead of an enemy stand to gain something profoundly valuable. They are willing to acknowledge the truth that has waited patiently beneath the surface. They speak the words they have postponed for too long. They recognize the desires they have repeatedly denied simply because accepting them would require change. These individuals enter the approaching eclipse season carrying a different kind of strength. It is not a strength built upon appearances or carefully maintained identities. It is rooted in honesty, integration, emotional stability, and genuine self-acceptance. By contrast, continuing to protect a false image becomes increasingly difficult as the eclipse approaches. Clinging more tightly to performances that no longer reflect reality may only intensify the changes that eventually become unavoidable, because life often dismantles the structures we refuse to release voluntarily. If something meaningful rises within you today, whether it appears as an unexpected emotion, a realization, an impulse, or a truth you can no longer ignore, give yourself permission to remain present with it. Resist the temptation to explain it away, distract yourself from it, or bury it beneath endless activity. Sit quietly with what has emerged and ask what deeper message it carries. Trust that whatever is asking for your attention has not appeared because you are incapable of facing it. It has appeared because this moment in your journey has finally provided the conditions for healing to begin. You are not unraveling. You are not becoming less yourself. Quite the opposite. The parts of your identity that have spent far too long separated from your conscious life are finally finding their way back into wholeness. That process may not always feel comfortable, yet it is worthy of gratitude because it leads you closer to the person you have always been beneath every performance and every fear. Thank you for sharing this time with me today. If this conversation resonated with something unfolding inside your own life, and you would like to continue exploring these astrological moments together, I would truly appreciate your support by subscribing to the channel. I also invite you to leave a comment and share what has been moving within you throughout this week. Tell me about the realization that has been quietly waiting beneath the surface, or the truth that has finally begun asking for your attention. I take the time to read every comment because I believe many of us are walking through this extraordinary period together. Until next time, treat yourself with patience, offer yourself kindness, and remember that every meaningful transformation begins by allowing yourself to see what was ready to be seen all along.